of other people, they don't know exactly how to look after it and what to do with it.
Yes, and we'd all like to think it was us.
Yes, because I know exactly what I'd do a lot with it. I'd do a lot with it because I'd do a lot with it and I'd give a lot away.
And you've got
to charities.
And you've got a big heart, as has Gary. But what do you think of it getting up to 44 million, Gary?
Oh, I feel sorry for the people, really. It's a huge burden to actually land on somebody. I remember I was just laughing to myself. I remember when Pam and I were really, really, really poor. And on Saturday nights, we used to sit down and we'd hear what the Lotto prize was. And then we'd plan who we'd give it to because we didn't have a ticket. But it was the Saturday night game that we used to play. It was great.
You wouldn't give it all away, though.
No,
I know you're a nice man, but
yeah, I wouldn't feel morally obliged to keep too much of it. I think that you only need so much.
I agree with you, because you can't, seriously, you cannot take it. That's saying you can't take it with you, you can't.
No.
And I think to do something with it would be the thing, is to feel that you've done something worthwhile.
I certainly wouldn't want to be constipated by money.
Constipated by money. Now, a couple of quick things to ask you before we go. Maybe the 110 k's an hour speed limit looking likely on some New Zealand roads. There'll be motorways, essentially. 2 lanes either side, a medium barrier in the middle, no direct access to roadside properties. There would be the criteria. Are you happy enough with that, 110 k's?
Yeah, I think it's okay as it is now, because people do 110 half the time anyway.
Yes,
so
that's right.
You know,
you took my line.
You make it 110, it's going to be doing 120. So
I know that's right. It will allow people to go to speed more. But generally speaking, is it sensible, Gary, or not?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm going away vintage motoring this weekend, and I have an official certificate from the Transport Department saying my car does considerably more than 110 already. So,
I thought you were going to say I thought you were going to say you had a dispensation like those Italian Formula One drivers to speed in normal circumstances.
That
like
would be
Italian
fantastic. Where do you get them?
Well, can I just say I rode in a V12 Rolls Royce the other day, and I said to the driver, how fast does this thing go, being a V12? And he said, do you want to see? I said, no, I don't want you to do it. But I think it was 250 miles an hour.
Eh?
It was massive.
That's very fast.
Yeah, but it was V12. Massive thing. Massive.
Rolls Royce.
Motor.
All right. Before we go, New Zealand Māori coach Colin Cooper has confirmed All Black prop Kane Hames, when the team plays Munster this weekend, won't be able to wear a Standing Rock wristband. He wore one in the game against the United States Eagles in Chicago. Colin Cooper says he's been told who he represents and that probably moral or political statements are not an opportunity to use on this stage. Is this the right decision?
Gary?
No.
He should be allowed to.
Absolutely. I think he's showing solidarity with a group of people who are struggling. Good on him. Why should it just be an advertisement on their T-shirt? There you go.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, but he won't be doing that. He'll be rendering unto Colin the things that are Colin's, I think, in this game against Munster. Gary Moore, lovely to have you on the panel again.
Yes.
Come back soon. And Julia Hartley-Moore, ditto. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, everybody. That big US election coverage coming up on Checkpoint with John Campbell, and we are back tomorrow.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Vicky Latelli is leaving prison. Breaking news. Her uncle is on the phone at the prison. We will talk to him at the top of the program. Trumped. What happened, why it happened, who made it happen, who benefits, who doesn't, what it means for the TPP and much more. What do people think of it all? Americans, New Zealanders, world leaders, at length and in depth. The US elections. Also tonight, the tram derailment in London. Will the speed limit increase to 110 on some stretches of New Zealand motorway? New Zealand cricket disrespecting women, and Lotto. Someone just north of Auckland won $44 million. All of that and much more after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. Anti-Trump protests are spreading across a number of major cities in the United States following the shock election of Donald Trump as the next president. The police in Seattle say they're investigating reports of a shooting near the scene of one of the protests, and there could be multiple victims. The demonstrations come despite calls for national unity from Mr. Trump, Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in Chicago, Seattle, Oakland, Los Angeles and Austin, among others. The largest protest is in New York, where an estimated 5,000 people gathered outside Trump Tower in Manhattan. CNN's Jean Kazaz says they're determined to show their opposition to Mr. Trump's election.
They're chanting, Donald Trump is not our president, Donald Trump, go away. Some are, Trump is not our voice. Don't take America. Don't make America hate again. Not my president. Some even saying America has never been great and there should be a revolution.
Jean Kazaz. The American Secretary of State says he's asked State Department staff to start working on a peaceful transfer of power to Mr. Trump. John Kerry, who's in New Zealand today, says the US has a tradition of a very constructive transfer within administrations.
We will do everything in our power, as I have instructed our team, to work with the incoming administration as fully and openly as possible, to be as helpful as possible, so that the transfer of power will be as smooth as it possibly can without missing a beat on the important issues before us.
John Kerry says he's confident there'll be a graceful handover process. Some of the speed limits on the country's busiest highways could rise to 110 kilometres an hour. The government has announced a new speed management guide, which will make it possible for the limit to go on certain roads. The Associate Transport Minister, Craig Foss, says a road will have to have a median barrier and at least 2 lanes in each direction to be eligible. He says the change potentially affects about 150 kilometres of road.
Such as parts of the Waikato Expressway, the new Tauranga Link, parts of the Northern Expressway in Christchurch, parts potentially of Transmission Gully and the new Kapiti extension. So those types of highly engineered, medium strip, medium barrier, double lanes, highly engineered roads.
Craig Foss says the guide allows the Transport Agency to make the changes, and it can do so from now on if it wishes. Last night's record-breaking $44 million Lotto prize has been won by a young couple from the Hibiscus Coast, north of Auckland. Lotto New Zealand has confirmed the couple, who want to remain anonymous, came forward with the winning ticket this morning. The winner said he realised he had the right numbers while he was on a smoko break at work. He says he jumped in his car and headed to a nearby Lotto store to check. The man's wife says she couldn't believe it when her husband told her they'd won. The couple, who have a young family, say they've been trying to buy their first home. More than 2.3 million tickets were sold for last night's draw. It's coming up to 5:03. In sport, just 2 players have kept their spots in the All Blacks starting lineup for this weekend's test against Italy following the historic loss to Ireland. Lock Patrick Tuipulotu and wing Waisake Naholo are the only ones coach Steve Hansen has retained. Here's rugby reporter Joe Porter.
Lock Scott Barrett and fullback Damien McKenzie get their first starts, while hooker Liam Coltman and wing Rico Ioane could debut from the bench. Open side Sam Cane will captain the team for just the second time, with the recalled Stephen Luatua at number 8 and Elliot Dixon at blindside. Aaron Cruden is at first 5 with halfback Tawera Kurbalo inside him. There's an entirely different front row in Wyatt Crockett, Cody Taylor and Charlie Famuina, while lock Brodie Retallick makes his return from concussion on the bench. This is Joe Porter.
The underperforming opener Martin Guptill has been dropped from the New Zealand cricket side for the 2-test series against Pakistan. He's been replaced by Auckland teammate Jeet Raval. The only other uncapped player is Auckland all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme, while the 1-test spinner Todd Astle is recalled. Fit again pace bowler Tim Southey replaces Doug Bracewell, while Luke Ronke and Jeetan Patel are also dropped. The Breakers manager Dylan Boucher says new American import David Stockton will bring all the qualities and skills to the basketball side that they've lost through the injury of Ben Woodside. Stockton is the son of NBA Basketball Hall of Famer John Stockton and has joined the club for the rest of the season. Boucher says Stockton's NBA experience with Sacramento Kings and the Washington Wizards will be invaluable.
He can get you steals at crucial moments, he can get to the hoop. You know, he's one of those guys that just does the things that are necessary to make a team more successful.
Dylan Boucher, that's the news.
A new president for all Americans.
What he stands for is against everything that I grew up being proud of being American is. To be honest, I'd get rid of my U.S. passport.
With the support of women.
Women looked at what he did and looked at his actions as opposed to some of the stupid things that he said.
And a finger on the trigger.
So I'll get the bad news out of the way first. The command of the nuclear arsenal, the order to fire, is done by the president alone.
The dawn of the Trump age. Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the risk of digital disruption to New Zealand retailers. And after 10, the tree-dwelling former Microsoft executive, now business analytics expert Donald Farmer. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
It's surface weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato and Taupo, also Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Sunny spells today, mostly cloudy tomorrow and scattered showers developing from afternoon. Possible thunderstorms in Northland tomorrow night. Waitomo, Taranaki, Taumaranui and Taihepe, mostly cloudy with drizzle at times, turning to rain later tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, isolated showers clearing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Wairarapa, rain at times, clearing from Whanganui, Manawatu and Wairarapa tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Nelson, Bulla and Westland, rain north of Hokitika, spreading south tomorrow with heavy falls developing. For Canterbury, cloudy areas, patchy rain developing tomorrow morning, rain becoming widespread and heavier from afternoon. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine today, a few showers tomorrow. The Chatham Islands, mainly fine today, low cloud and rain developing tomorrow. It's just gone 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Very big program tonight on the US elections. What happened, what made it happen and why. But we are going to begin with breaking news. Vicky Latelli, whose story we first brought to you a fortnight ago tomorrow, is to be released from prison. In fact, she is being released from prison right now. Remember, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud. She was diagnosed with a terminal cancer inside prison. Her family have been campaigning unsuccessfully at first to get her out. Now she is going. A few minutes ago, I spoke to Ula Latelli, Vicky's uncle, at the prison.
We've just been told by the regional commissioner and the director of Wiri that she can come home tonight, 6 o'clock. We're just packing her up now.
So where are you, Ula? Are you at the prison now?
I'm at the prison right now.
And you are there to collect Vicky?
Yes, I am.
And when did you find out this was happening? Just then?
Well, just right now. We're actually doing the afternoon visit. She's just come back from having her first infusion of the full-strength chemotherapy, and we're just walking out to go home, and the district commissioner came in, and the director rather of the facility came and told Vicky and us that we're just praising the Lord at the moment. Without His guidance and His strength, and people like yourself, John, and Bridge that have helped us put a voice out. We've endeavoured to do everything the proper way, and going to the media was the last resort, and coming to you, John, a man of the news but with a heart, and has enabled us to do what we've enabled the nation to show some compassion and some heart. And I just take my hat off to John Key and Judith Collins. You know, it was a gutsy thing for them to go out the way that they did and follow process and enable us to do the right thing for Vicky, take her home. She's, in fact, it's interesting. It's almost tomorrow. It'll be 2 months to the day that she was told of her prognosis. And her birthday's on Monday, and her partner's birthday's on Sunday. So even more poignant from the point of view that, you know, if what we're told is true, it'll be her last birthday, and we can celebrate it as a family.
Ula, it's 2 weeks tomorrow since you came to us and first told us this story, and Vicky's mum, Tui, first talked about her predicament, her situation, and it's happened so fast, hasn't it? Because at first there was resistance and kickback and there was no support for you, but it has gathered real momentum in the past week. And that's not about the media, that's about your voice and Tui's voice and the family's passionate advocacy for your niece and Tui's daughter. So this is a pretty magic result for you, isn't it, given the terrible, sad circumstances?
It's all I can say, deeply from my heart, and certainly Vicky and the family, it's a God thing. The groundswell of support by the many New Zealanders that have been touched by her case. And important to also just note that it's not just about Vicky, it's about others that were also affected that don't have a voice. But John, the media is such a powerful tool, and when it's used in a proper professional way in which you've conducted both, the times that you've met with the other members of my family and myself. John, look, words can't even describe what you've done.
No, I can well imagine what it must be like to be there and to have heard the news in those circumstances. So Vicky knows now she's coming with you. Ula,
she's in a pile of mess at the moment of joy and happiness, and so we're just packing her up, and then Mum Tui is arriving shortly, and then we're going to take her home.
Well, you enjoy your time with her, Ula.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Ula Latelli speaking to us just a few minutes ago, an unedited recording of the interview we did with him as we were finding out what went on. Vicky Latelli is heading home. She is going as we speak. Her uncle is there and her mum is coming to collect her as well. It's 5:11. Let's turn now to where we ended last night back in the United States. The country woke this morning to the reality that the next president will be Donald Trump. The pollsters who predicted a win for Hillary Clinton were wrong. Mr. Trump lost the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College 279 to 228. The difference, the battleground states, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, they all voted for Obama twice, but voted for Trump last night. The Democrats lost millions of the voters who'd supported Barack Obama. And white voters backed Donald Trump, white men of all ages and white men and women aged over 60 by a striking majority. After receiving a concession call from Hillary Clinton, Mr. Trump arrived with his family and Vice President Mike Pence to Republican HQ just after 2 a.m. New York time, pledging to renew the American dream.
Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream. Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it. All people and all other nations. We will seek common ground, not hostility, partnership, not conflict.
Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton did do well with African American, Latino and younger voters who voted, but many of them didn't vote. Mrs. Clinton did not face her supporters last night, but did this morning. This is some of what she said to them.
I know how disappointed you feel because I feel it too. And so do tens of millions of Americans who invested their hopes and dreams in this effort. This is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this. Our campaign was never about one person or even one election. It was about the country we love and about building an America that's hopeful, inclusive, and big-hearted. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do, then we must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. And we don't just respect that, we cherish it. It also enshrines other things: the rule of law, the principle that we are all equal in rights and dignity, freedom of worship and expression. We respect and cherish these values too, and we must defend them.
Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, thousands of protesters have gathered across the US tonight as the backlash against Trump's win continues. Demonstrations stopped traffic in the streets of Chicago and Portland and New York. Protesters packed streets, marching 40 blocks from Union Square to Trump Tower. A Trump effigy was burned in downtown Manhattan and a candlelight vigil was held outside the White House. Leaders around the world have reacted to the election result in varying ways, but as Alex Ashton reports, those most afraid of what the future holds for America seem to be Americans themselves.
Just hours after Donald Trump became president-elect, protests broke out in 7 cities across the United States. Hundreds of people holding anti-Trump and anti-racism placards gathered in New York and Chicago. From joy to fear within the United States itself, the world has reacted strongly to the news that Donald Trump will be the next president.
Over 90 languages are spoken within a few mile radius of our mosque. And within that context, we have 6-year-old girls being called ISIS, having their hijab torn off, eating lunch in the bathroom by themselves, and worse. This was before last night. So we are terrified of the bold and brazen attitudes that this morning we heard from parents and students in the hallways of classrooms in our communities. Politics is politics and bigotry is bigotry, and those two need to be separated.
Colin Christopher from the Dar al-Hujra Islamic Centre. His comments were today reinforced by Nihad Awad, the Executive Director of American Islamic Relations.
Regardless of who won yesterday's election, American Muslims are here to stay. We are not going anywhere, and we will not be intimidated or marginalized.
In Libya, locals regarded Trump's election as bad news for the Arab world.
He's against Arabs and he doesn't like Muslims at all. This will be bad for Arabs, and if he continues this way, we and the whole Arab world are in trouble. Honestly, I do not support him.
In Moscow, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he was looking forward to a warmer relationship with Americans.
And I'd like to congratulate the American people with the end of the electoral cycle.
Господина Дональда Трампа с победой на этих выборах.
And I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Donald Trump with his victory in these elections.
Но Россия готова и хочет восстановления полноформатных отношений с Соединенными Штатами.
But Russia is ready and wants to restore the full-fledged relations with the United States.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel congratulated Mr. Trump, stressing the importance of continuing good transatlantic relations as a tool to managing global crises.
The US is an old and honourable democracy. The election campaign this year was a particular one, with some confrontations that were difficult to stomach. I, as many of you, watched the election results with trepidation. The person the American people choose to be their president in free and fair elections has an effect far beyond the US. In the case of Germany, there is no country outside the EU that we have deeper ties to than the US. Germany and America are bound together by values: democracy, freedom, respect of law and respect of people, regardless of their origin and the colour of their skin, their religion, gender, sexual orientation, or their political beliefs.
The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, maintained the enduring and special relationship between Britain and the United States would remain strong and intact.
Given what he said in the campaign about women, about Muslims, and some of the plans that have raised eyebrows, is he a fit person to hold this office, and will you be able to work with him?
Yes, I look forward to working with President-elect Trump. The American people have elected him as the next President of the United States. Britain and the United States share values of freedom, of democracy and enterprise, and I look forward to building on the special relationship we have between our two countries to ensure the security and prosperity of our two nations in the future.
Mexico's Finance Minister, Jose Antonio Meade, said the result wouldn't result in an immediate impact on trade, financial flows and travel between the two countries.
Mexico is in a position of strength to face this new environment.
Una inflación observada baja.
We have seen low inflation, around 3%, with future expectations well anchored inside the Bank of Mexico's objective range.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte congratulated Mr. Trump, the maverick leader telling a crowd, "Long live Trump," and mentioning their similar traits.
We both curse. Even with trivial matters we curse. We are very similar in that way.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who last year said he feared travelling to New York for fear of meeting Donald Trump, has changed his tune.
We look forward to working with his administration in due course when it is formed, to help to deliver security, stability, prosperity, the values that Britain and America jointly believe in.
Canada's immigration website crashed in response to the election result as Americans looked to leave the United States. The President, Justin Trudeau, said he would work with Mr. Trump despite a sense his victory could impact on Canadian exporters.
We share a purpose, our two countries, where we want to build places where the middle class and those working hard to join it have a chance. We need governments focused on service, and that's what we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep working with people right around the world. We're going to work with our neighbors, and I'm going to work with President-elect Trump's administration as we move forward in a positive way for not just Canadians and Americans, but the whole world.
Back in the United States, the President Barack Obama, who had campaigned hard on behalf of Hillary Clinton, today urged Americans to put aside their disappointment.
It is no secret that the President-elect and I have some pretty significant differences. But remember, 8 years ago, President Bush and I had some pretty significant differences. But President Bush's team could not have been more professional or more gracious in making sure we had a smooth transition so that we could hit the ground running. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world. I've said before, I think of this job as being a relay runner. You take the baton, you run your best race, and hopefully by the time you hand it off, you're a little further ahead.
Barack Obama will welcome Donald Trump to the White House for a visit tomorrow morning New Zealand time to discuss the transition of their presidencies. Mr. Obama will stay on as president until Donald Trump's inauguration, scheduled for January 20. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
We wanted to talk to American people about this, and United Airlines Flight 916 was leaving Auckland bound for San Francisco earlier this afternoon. So Alex Ashton went out to the airport to ask passengers how they feel about returning home to a new Trump presidency.
It's a shit show. It's terrible. Horrible choice, but we're stuck with him, so that's what we got to do.
Do you think it'll change much?
No, there's enough safeguards in place with the Supreme Court and all that he's not going to be able to do anything he really wants to do. So it's going to be the same country it was, just a crazy guy at the front of it.
I like it.
Yeah?
I'm very happy I voted for him.
Cool. And why is that?
Well, I believe in his immigration, and I'm tired of professional politicians. He did it on his own. He's a businessman. You can call him good or bad, but he's not a professional politician, so I voted for him.
You know, I didn't vote for him, but he moved mountains to pull off a miracle, which says a lot. I mean, it proves the American dream. So I have to get behind him now and hope for the best. I think that from what he's shown, he's going to get done what he wants to get done, and I think a lot of change could come to America. The scary part is that he's not. He's never held a public office, so it'd be like asking me to go be your quarterback for a football team, and I've never played football, right? But I feel like realistically he can, with his vision and his ability to do things, maybe that will actually change some of the things that haven't been able to change in the past.
It's a disaster, I think, yeah.
And why is
We're
that?
mourning now because his attitude toward minorities, and he went, I don't know, we just very, very disappointed.
Yeah, so do you think much is actually going to change under Trump?
No, I don't think so, because the Founding Fathers put our Constitution together so that there would not be any big changes, enormous changes all at once.
What do you think of your new president?
Well, I'm not as happy about the outcome on this election insofar as we were supporting Secretary Clinton. So I have some significant apprehension about what the future holds for the United States. But it remains to be seen whether or not some of the rhetoric that Mr. Trump has spewed during his campaign will be softened, and possibly he'll demonstrate a side to him that I haven't seen yet. So we're cautiously optimistic about the future.
What do you hope changes under Trump?
Everything.
That the economy gets
Economy,
better.
Obamacare, and immigration. I live in Florida. There's a lot of illegal aliens, and immigration is draining the system.
We are economically down, and we need to be lifted up. And he's a businessman, and he's going to do that. Our kids can't get the jobs that we got.
Yeah.
They have master's degrees, and they are working for $15 an hour because there are no jobs. There are no good jobs in America.
I think he'll behave as a president not in the same mode as a campaigning politician. Right. So I think people will be pleasantly surprised.
So he might come more towards the middle, do you think?
I think the bombast and the flagrant language is going to calm down. I think people will be pleasantly surprised.
I think it's shocking right now, again, from the attitude of what he had to do to campaign to win. But I agree. I think he'll settle in and everything will be just fine.
I think it's the rule of thirds. So I think a third of the country's pleased, a third of the country's not all that happy, and a third are taking the wait-and-see approach. I'll let you decide which third you think I'm in. But
oh, no, you tell me which third are you in, mate?
I'm in the wait-and-see category.
Yeah.
So what happened and why? Well, perhaps one answer lies in the numbers. In 2008, Barack Obama received 69 million votes and John McCain received 59 million. In 2016, Clinton and Trump both received 58 million. So the Republican turnout, the overall turnout, didn't change, but 11 million fewer people voted for the Democrats. Thomas Frank is the author of Listen, Liberal, with the subtitle Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. He argues that the working class roots of the Democratic movement have been betrayed by corporate and cultural elitism. And in the Guardian this morning, he elaborated on that in an article entitled Donald Trump is moving to the White House and Liberals put him there. He argues Democrats blew it, first with their disconnection from their own base and secondly with their candidate. Of Hillary Clinton, he says she was exactly the wrong candidate for this angry populist moment, an insider when the country was screaming for an outsider.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the problem. I mean, she ran as a kind of super technocrat, you know. She knew how to twist the dials and make everything work back in D.C. And that's not what the public was looking for. That's rarely what any public ever is looking for, but especially this time. I mean, this is yet another angry, hard times election in the United States. Even though I know the economy looks good on paper these days, still a lot of people are, you know, especially white working class people, are very upset. They're watching their way of life slip away, and they want somebody to do something about it. And they are ready to sign up for a mass movement of outrage that is in some ways kind of similar to what they signed up for 8 years ago with Barack Obama.
And this is really interesting, and it feels to me like it's been ignored a little bit. If we look at the swing states, if we look at Florida, if we look at Ohio, they voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. So people who were kind of reflexively saying this is racism are ignoring the fact that a lot of these people supported Obama last for 2 elections, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're looking for hope and change. Obama remains ironically, remains a very popular figure in a lot of these places. Had he been on the ballot, he probably would have won, He's still a very inspiring figure. Hillary Clinton is not that. And not only is she not that, but she's married to the man who a lot of these voters regard as, the great turncoat. The one who, when the Democratic Party turned against working class people, they associate that with Bill Clinton and the various trade agreements that he got done, the bank deregulation, and they associate Hillary with that stuff. But there are a lot of racist voters in America, and by and large, they signed up for Donald Trump. But that's not enough to elect a man president, especially not on the terms that we just saw. Not even close. He had something else going for him, and that was that in his kind of clumsy, tongue-tied, egotistical way, he was getting at the problem, the great big problem, the grievance that these people have against the world.
And what is the grievance they have against the world? You used the word outrage before. What are they outraged about?
Well, the middle class in this country is coming apart. So I wrote a story for The Guardian last week where I talked about a town in central Illinois where I spent a lot of time when I was younger, a place called Decatur, Illinois. I was down there in the 90s because they had a bunch of strikes, and I was writing about the strikes for a newspaper in Chicago. But in the 1940s, Decatur was regarded as the most average city in America, and sociologists would write about it. And one of the things they discovered was that people who owned the factories there made about twice as much as blue-collar workers, twice as much. Today they make about 400 times as much. And that sort of thing is happening all over this country, all over the United States. And meanwhile, there's no job security anymore. Even if people aren't on the downward slide yet, they can see it coming. They can see it coming for their children who are deep in debt from college. And they can see what's happening to the workplace, that every job is being casualized. And people don't like it. I mean, it makes them furious. The thing is, we had this great recession, financial crisis, which we brought to the world. And the upper part of America has recovered very nicely from that. They're doing great. The wealthy parts of America are doing great. But your middle class, working class America has not seen a recovery, and they are starting to understand that there's been a permanent change in the way the economy works for them, and they are lashing out in any way they can. And yes, a lot of them signed up for Barack Obama in 2008, and a lot of them signed up for this, and a lot of them signed up for Bernie Sanders too, by the way, who was kind of an interesting variation, and who probably, I think, would have been president had the Democrats chosen him, but no, they couldn't do that, right? Had to be Hillary.
I read that article in The Guardian last week. The left behind are having their say. It was subtitled by The Guardian. And boy, if you read it again, it's strikingly prescient now, because you took stock of those people in those communities and their sense of having been left behind, to use that phrase. But if we go to Nevada, where the Culinary Union, and we spoke to them a couple of days ago in our preview to the election, were mobilizing 50,000 members against Trump. And the people in that union who have Trump as an employer hate him. I mean, they say he is the worst. They say he is right. So he is the worst employer in Nevada. They hate him. They were mobilizing. They were taking days off to campaign against him. So how on earth did blue-collar whites see him as the answer?
Well, that's the great paradox of American history. It's a massive, massive irony. And, that there are union members who voted for this guy all over the country. And look, this has been building. This has been coming for a long, long, long time. The Democrats, the story of Listen Liberal is how this happened. The Democrats turned their back on working class people beginning in the 1970s, and increasingly more and more and more over the years, until now you have this where it's just completely a lost cause. But it's fascinating that the Democrats have by and large been in denial that this is happening. They refuse to believe that it's happening because it doesn't make sense, in a kind of in a logical way. There's so much about it that is so confusing and so paradoxical and so self-injuring. I don't think Trump is going to be particularly good for these people that have, that a lot of these people that voted for him. Maybe he'll get some revision in the NAFTA agreement done, and maybe that'll be good. But by and large, no, he doesn't have a clue what to do for these people. He's not going to be good for them. This is a very dark day for people who care about progressive causes in the United States.
That's Thomas Frank. His book is Listen, Liberal, and his op-ed commentary on all of this is in The Guardian up on their website. What does all of this mean for New Zealand? Well, our politicians are starting to ponder the implications of a Trump presidency. One of the first casualties appears to be the TPP. We'll have more on that from the States later. But Mr. Trump has signalled he will withdraw the US from the deal. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Donald Trump fiercely denounced the 12-nation TPP on the campaign trail, and the Majority Leader of the US Senate, Mitch McConnell, made it clear today there will be no vote on it before Mr. Trump takes office in January. The Trade Minister Todd McClay says the government will forge ahead with the TPP anyway, as free trade is vitally important to New Zealand's economy. But he acknowledges there will be challenges to get the deal across the line.
But I think when the new administration is in place, we're in a better position to talk to them more broadly about their view of trade in the world, the role they play in the WTO, and how we will work closely together with them. I do believe we'll be able to work with the US administration on trade policy.
He says the third and final reading of the ratifying legislation will still go ahead. The long-time TPP opponent, law professor Jane Kelsey, says that would be a bad look.
We'll be the only of the 12 countries to have passed the implementing legislation. Others have decided they need to wait and see what happens in the US. They have been prudent. We have not. That doesn't look good.
The US Secretary of State John Kerry is in New Zealand en route to Antarctica. Speaking in Christchurch this morning, he promised a smooth transition to the new administration and congratulated the President-elect.
And wish him well for the American people, for him, for his family, the enormous challenges that he will undertake to resolve, to meet with the same spirit, I hope, that characterises every presidency, Republican or Democrat.
New Zealand currently has a training mission in Iraq working within a US-led coalition. Labour MP David Shearer says it's hard to see how the broader defence relationship will be affected, despite Mr. Trump saying on one hand the US is too involved in other people's wars.
He's also said that he would increase military spending and make the US great again. He said he wants to defeat ISIS. I mean, that is going to involve somehow the US becoming as involved or perhaps more involved. But the more that the US turns inward, the more that their rival powers, Russia and China in particular, look at this as an opportunity for themselves.
Political leaders acknowledged the election of Mr. Trump in Parliament this afternoon. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters accused other politicians of ignoring the sentiments that fuelled Mr. Trump's victory.
And I look around some of the faces here today, sneering and scoffing, and I want ordinary New Zealand's workers out there to know one thing. These people are staring at you. They're staring at your dreams and hopes. They are so up themselves, they are so arrogant that they think any decent sentiment about housing, health, education and first world jobs is not worthy.
Prompting this from the Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox.
I had 3 words in mind and they weren't those ones. I think they were pot, kettle and black.
Important to the bilateral relationship is how the leaders get on in a personal capacity. The Prime Minister John Key says he may bond with Mr. Trump on the golf course.
Well, he's got a selection of courses to offer up as a place to play. So, yeah, if he wants to get the clubs out, why not?
And while Mr. Key acknowledges the TPP isn't going ahead in the short term, he says there may be an opportunity to renegotiate it because Mr. Trump will get the same advice from officials to boost America's presence in Asia. And he says while it's unusual for a sitting US president to visit New Zealand, the invitation will certainly be extended to Donald Trump. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Coming up to 20 to 6 in the next 20 minutes, the $44 million Powerball winner. That's so much money you could have a flag referendum and still have $17 million left over, and 110k speed limit on some parts of New Zealand's motorways. But first, later than ever before, here is Katrina Batten with the 5:30 headlines.
I think you've set a new record there, John Campbell. The terminally ill prisoner Vicky Latelli is being released from jail tonight so she can be cared for at home. Latelli's family have been fighting for her to be released early from the 3-year, 2-month sentence she's serving for property fraud because she has stomach cancer. The parole board initially turned down their request, but in a decision released today, says she's clearly seriously ill and unlikely to recover. Anti-Trump protests are spreading across a number of major American cities following the shock election of Donald Trump as next president. The police in Seattle are investigating reports of a shooting near the scene of one of the protests, and there could be multiple victims. The demonstrations by thousands of people come despite calls for national unity from Mr. Trump, Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama. Some of the speed limits on the country's busiest highways could rise to 110 kilometres an hour. The government has announced a new speed management guide that will make it possible to increase the limit on certain roads. The Associate Transport Minister, Craig Foss, says the change potentially affects about 150 kilometres of road. District health boards are going to the employment court to try to stop junior doctors going on strike in a fortnight. The health boards believe the latest strike notices could be invalid and have applied for an urgent injunction because the ballot on the strike action could have been taken separately for each DHB. The Corrections Department says an altercation between inmates and prison officers at Christchurch Men's Prison was brought under control quickly. It says the attack on 4 staff by 7 prisoners happened last night and the officers were treated at the scene and by their GP. The department has declined to comment further, saying the matter is now before the police. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. We should say we have more on the TPP and the US elections after 6, but let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell. Jonathan, hello. Welcome from Wellington. It appears to be a case of one and done for the Reserve Bank in this rate-cutting cycle.
That's right. As expected, it cut the official cash rate to 1.75%, again in an effort to get the inflation back to that midpoint, 1 to 3%. It believes today's cut will help get it on that track. I've got actually some projections in front of me from the Reserve Bank. They're expecting annual inflation to reach that 2% midpoint by December 2018. What's more interesting, these projections go right out to December 2019. And from now until then, they're picking and projecting the official cash rate to hang around the current level, 1.75%. But for now, so we're in a period of low interest rates for the next little while. It could go down further. The factors that would drive that would be primarily overseas. The big one would be, starting with T, Donald Trump. His presidency is seen as more of a risk. Then Clinton was perceived as being more status quo. Next is Brexit. Britain's exit from the European Union. That Article 50 is being activated next year. What that actually will look like is still unknown. And then there's China and a concern about China's level of debt, especially corporate debt. So for now, the Reserve Bank has cut. Probably at the end of the cycle. It can leave another rate cut in the wings. It doesn't really need to bring it out centre stage unless some of those foreign characters play up.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let's talk about the markets. They fell out of bed last night as they reacted to the surprise of Trump winning the presidency. What have they done today?
Here in New Zealand, we've regained some of the losses from yesterday, ending up 1% or 70 points to 6,734. What's interesting, investors seem to be taking the view that Mr. Trump's policies will actually boost economic growth in the US and in turn be good for their businesses. So there's a bit of a viewpoint out there about that. Overseas as well, overseas markets have regained. The Japanese Nikkei up 6% when I last looked a few moments ago. Australia up 3%, 1% gains across the board in the US, Europe and Asia as well. And the dollar is trading a little bit softer, 72.4 US cents and 94.5 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, thank you very much indeed. 26 to 6, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. No, it's not, it's 16 to 6, sorry. A couple from the Hibiscus Coast north of Auckland have come forward to claim last night's record-breaking $44 million Lotto prize. The couple, who want to remain anonymous, have a young family, and in a statement released by Lotto New Zealand, they say they've been busting a gut trying to buy their first home. Earlier this week, they went to a mortgage broker, believe it or not, to see what they could do to help, but nothing would work. They left gutted. But they didn't think that they were going to win $44 million by the end of the week. The couple bought their lucky ticket from the Dairy Flat Food Mart and Liquor Store. And our reporter Sarah Robson headed out there this morning to talk to, well, some of the locals who didn't win.
Dairy Flat is about a 30-minute drive out of the Auckland CBD on State Highway 17. It's a busy little place. Cars pulling into the petrol station, truck drivers and high-vis getting out of their rigs to pick up an award-winning pie. Next door to the bakery is the Dairy Flat Food Mart and Liquor Store, where last night's winning $44 million Lotto ticket was sold. And this morning there were plenty of locals going in to check their tickets, but leaving disappointed.
I'm totally gutted. Totally gutted. Yeah, because it could have been me. And we've all dreamed 44 million, what would we do? So now I just have to dream all over again.
And they didn't win, it's pretty pissed off. There was a guy in front of me, it was just saying that, I bought my ticket from here, I didn't win it. Oh well, lucky the draw, isn't it?
I've already seen on our local Facebook page that people are sort of saying, the person out there, if you've won, could you think of the local schools and try to maybe support the community? So, hey, we'll wait and see, hopefully.
The store's owner, Nishal Pandya, says he was left speechless after hearing his store had sold the lucky ticket. He says it's the first time they've sold such a major winning First Division ticket, aside from a big bullseye prize last year.
But that was just a 280k. This is the first big one for us.
I guess, do you think it might improve business a little bit?
Yeah, I hope so.
And it's been quite busy in here this morning as well.
Normally we open at 8, but today we open at 7:30. We know that people will come to check the tickets, and it was very busy this morning.
Nishal Pandya says he got a call from one of his staff at another store he owns at Manly on the Whangaparaoa Peninsula, about a half-hour drive from Dairy Flat. The staff member told him that someone had come in to check their ticket and claimed the big prize.
My staff told me that he comes regularly here and he goes to the other shop as well.
Sujal Patel was behind the counter at the Dairy Flat store this morning, checking tickets through the Lotto machine and breaking the news to those who had missed out. He's hopeful the winner is a local.
Because we have the more locals coming in rather than the passing by people, so we have our regular customers and they are the most who buys the ticket, so I'm putting my finger crossed that I wish it's one of the local.
Lotto New Zealand says 2.3 million tickets were sold for last night's draw. The winning couple say they're planning on giving their kids a really great Christmas this year. For Checkpoint, Sarah Robson, aho.
30 minutes to 6. If you're driving home on a motorway in any of our major centres, chances are you aren't travelling at anything approaching the speed limit. So when the Associate Minister of Transport floats the idea of increasing the limit to 110k on some roads, you may want to utter that great phrase from the castle, tell him he's dreaming. But a new speed management guide released today does contain the potential to raise the open road limit to 110 on certain stretches of road only. These changes will be open for consultation. This isn't a done deal, we're told, but if it did happen, where would you be able to go 110k? Here's Craig Foss.
So those roads, as people might recognise, sections of the Waikato Expressway, the Tauranga Eastern Link, some parts of the Auckland Motorway, then potentially Transmission Gully, the Kapiti Expressway and the northern part of the new Christchurch Motorway.
OK, so these would be roads always with a median barrier, right?
The absolutely highest engineered we've got. So medium barrier, double lanes, no T-type intersections on them, and even the corners, etc., have all been engineered to the highest level to allow a slightly higher speed limit of 110.
OK, so there are no circumstances, no normal circumstances anyway, in which you could have a head-on those motorways?
No normal circumstances, none whatsoever. They are totally separated motorways.
OK, if we look at the road toll, it's higher already. Yes. In fact, at the beginning of October, at the beginning of last month, it passed the toll for all of last year.
Yes.
And so, prima facie, we're not as good on the roads as we should be. Aren't you adding risk to a situation which is already too fatal, too costly?
Yes, you raise a very good point regarding risk. So insofar as the roads that could have 110k on them, the highly engineered roads, For example, the Tauranga Expressway, since that was opened, that's had 0 fatalities on it. These are the safest roads in New Zealand. But your point is absolutely right around risk. Our road toll is far, far, far tragically too high. But the things that are contributing to our road toll are hugely excessive speed, hugely excessive alcohol or drugs or fleeing from police, or would you believe not wearing a seatbelt and a helmet. That's half to 2/3 of our road toll, which is currently running about 330. That's 330 too many funerals.
Right, what about tolerance, Minister? At the moment there is a sense, other than on those holiday weekends when the police ride tolerance and in fact give none, there is a sense that you can do 108 in a 100k zone and no one's even going to look twice at you. What will be the rules around tolerance at 110?
Yeah, you'll have to address that one to the police, and it's entirely up to them on that one. They are generally supportive of these changes, but of course only on the very high, safe and highly engineered roads that I've been talking about.
Craig Foss talking to us earlier. We'd love your feedback on this. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And of course we are on Twitter and Facebook. A tram driver has been arrested after a derailment in South London left at least 7 people dead and 50 injured. Authorities say the 42-year-old tram driver has been charged with manslaughter. Here's Bridget Burke.
Aerial footage shows the aftermath of a derailment in the South London suburb of Croydon just after 6 a.m. this morning. Morning commuters said the tram was coming down a hill at high speed towards a tunnel when it failed to take a bend, flipped and landed on its side between the Lloyd Park and Sandilands stations. At least 7 people were killed and 50 injured, 8 of whom were described as being in a critical condition. Survivors described blood-soaked passengers and commuters trapped in wreckage. This local resident was woken by the noise of the crash.
I was fast asleep and it was a really, really loud bang. It kind of dragged on for a few seconds and I thought it was a car crash outside. Sometimes it's a busy road, you do get car crashes. And that was it really. Woke up a little later and all the roads are closed, all the buses are stopped, can't go anywhere, and unfortunately there's been a major accident with the tram service.
It took emergency services 4 hours to free survivors who were transported to 3 different hospitals. British Prime Minister Theresa May offered her condolences.
My thoughts and prayers are with all of those who've been affected by this terrible incident.
Reports suggest the tram driver may have blacked out before the crash. It's the first fatal tram crash in London since 1959, when 2 women and the driver died after a tram caught fire following a collision with a truck. For Checkpoint, I'm Bridget Burke.
8 minutes to 6. District health boards are seeking an urgent injunction in a bid to stop the next junior doctors' strike. The proceedings, filed last night, show the health boards want legal clarity around whether newly graduated doctors can be involved and whether the ballot on strike action should have been taken separately for each DHB. The lead chief executive for the DHBs, Julie Patterson, told our reporter Michael Kropp she's not sure whether the latest strike notice is indeed valid.
The legal questions are around, obviously around the validity of the notice. Now, we asked questions about the notices this time. The union advised that they had balloted across the country.
So is the problem that, for at least this part of the problem, that they've all voted together? It's just it's been a blanket majority.
That's a really nice way of saying it. So a blanket majority across the country as opposed to what is the situation in each individual DHB. This, what we think is invalid balloting, could well have happened last time, but we just weren't aware of it. We assumed that every DHB had been balloted, separately, and the results meant that all 20 DHBs had a majority to go on strike. Now, because we're 20 different employers, 20 different strike notices have been issued, but it does seem to us that not 20 different ballots were done.
That's Julie Patterson. By contrast, the Junior Doctors National Secretary Deborah Powell says the injunction is a sign of desperation.
This is a question of law that the DHBs are raising, and there doesn't appear to be any precedent on the question they have raised. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the court finds.
Is there a feeling that this is in, I don't know, maybe a bit of sour grapes, some poor taste here because the mediation talks fell apart earlier this week?
It is something district health boards do when they're getting a bit desperate, if I can put it that way, in my experience. the district health boards, their offer is not acceptable to our members. And after mediation, we heard quite a bit in the media, or the district health board certainly saying in the media, that it was a fabulous offer, and it's just that the doctors didn't understand. The doctors do understand. They know their collective employment agreement very well. They work under it. They also know what their working lives are like. They can and have read the offer from the employers. They know that it will not result in safer rosters, and they're not going to settle their contract until safer rosters are guaranteed. This legal action will not stop strike action. It will at best delay it.
That's the Junior Doctors National Secretary, Deborah Powell. New Zealand cricket admits it's shown little respect for the women's game and that it has fallen into neglect. A damning independent report into the state of women's cricket has forced the governing body to admit it simply hasn't done enough. New Zealand cricket boss David White starts this report from Barry Guy.
We're putting our hands up and saying that it's not right. We've got to do something. Once they became amalgamated, for some reason there was just a decline. And I think that the expectation was that women or the women's game should just fit under the men's game, but it clearly hasn't worked.
David White admitting they'd dropped the ball. The report reveals only 10% of players in the sport are female, and of those 90% are under 12. The Women and Cricket report carried out by Sarah Beeman, a former Auckland representative, has revealed the game's demise, with Beeman saying at times she thought she was studying an endangered species. It found over 90% of cricket clubs don't have female-only teams, while almost 60% of clubs don't offer cricket for girls at all. White says for a long time the women's game was seen as a cost to the business. He admits they have to look at the governance, as well as the numbers, and the type of game girls and women want to play.
One of the problems we've got at the moment is the traditional structure we've got is not what they want. All our surveys are saying they want fast, they want fun, they want to be playing with themselves, the girls. At the moment, a lot of the cricket is played with boys.
The author of the report, Sarah Beeman, says internationally sports are realising they must cater for women to survive.
In Australia, typically male-dominated sports call it now it's an arms race. It's actually about saying which of us can engage with females more and quicker, because actually 82% of the females are the ones who make the purchasing decisions. Women have a lot of power and potential, so I think that that's just as going to be happening in New Zealand as well.
Sarah Beeman. The women's game certainly needs help in many parts of New Zealand. For instance, Wellington is struggling to get 4 competitive teams in the senior women's competition. 16-year-old Beth Maloney has only been playing for 3 years and says she got into the Wellington Girls College team straight away, basically because they needed every player they could get. She's since progressed through the grades and was due to debut in the senior competition last week, but the opposition couldn't field a team. Beth is disappointed that very few people appear to know much about our top women's team, the White Ferns.
I was talking to my friend the other day and she was saying about the men's cricket and how they're doing and stuff, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, the women are doing quite well as well, and she was like, she had no idea what was going on, no one I don't think people know how to follow them, just because the men's is always on TV and you don't really see what's happening in the women's side.
Improving the profile of the women's game is something New Zealand cricket is keen to do. For Checkpoint, Barry Guy.
The time is coming up to 2 minutes to 6. Lots of feedback on Vicky Latelli being released from prison back into the care of her family. The woman sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud, who was terminally ill. We began our program with that breaking news tonight, and overwhelmingly people are saying how delighted they are. Thank you for all of that feedback. We discussed with Craig Foss the idea of raising the speed limit to 110k in some areas, pretty prescribed parts of our motorway system, basically new areas of the motorway system. The response has been mixed. New speed limit, more emissions, great for climate change, says Bruce. Ian in Christchurch says, John, will truck speed limits also increase in these areas from 90 to 100? Many truck buses use speed limits to keep speeds at under existing truck speed limit of 90. How will those limiters still work, says Ian. Ian, that's a hell of a good question about trucks, and we will call the Minister's office and have an answer for you. 110k limit is common in Australia. The Newell Highway in northwest New South Wales was reduced to 100. Accidents increased due to cars not being able to safely overtake. Speed limit was lifted back up. Having driven long distances in Australia for many years, the 110 is safer as it keeps drivers engaged more. And Nick says, and this really is the elephant in the room in this country, we don't talk about it much, the suicide rate is twice the road toll, and what are we doing about that? I'm not sure about the numbers, Nick, but the suicide rate is very, very high, and it is a good question. Thank you for your feedback. Let's have a break for the sting. Katrina has just arrived in the studio to do the 6 o'clock news. After the 6 o'clock news, protests break out as Donald Trump wins the presidential election. We'll have full coverage from the US and New Zealand. Plus the TPP, has it gone the same way as the Clinton campaign? We talked to an expert in the TPP in the US who says yes. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, the pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Thousands of anti-Trump demonstrators have taken to the streets in the United States, in cities from the East Coast to the West, following Donald Trump's surprise election victory. The protests come despite calls for national unity from Mr. Trump, Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama. They're being held in about 7 major cities, including New York, Chicago, Seattle and Oakland, California. In Los Angeles, many of the protesters are Latino voters who say they're worried about the future of their families under Donald Trump's policies.
I'm worried that our racist president is going to deport my family back to their homelands. It's not right. We have the right to be here. No one should ever be back to deported or where they come from. Donald Trump needs to leave the White House. He needs to be impeached.
An anti-Trump protester on the streets of Los Angeles. A gunman opened fire near one of the protests in downtown Seattle, wounding 5 people, but the police said the shooting was unrelated to the demonstrations. The Prime Minister predicts little change to New Zealand's defence relationship with the United States under Donald Trump. John Campbell says one impact in the trade area could be on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, but New Zealand will not be giving up on that. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
New Zealand has close defence ties with the US, including a joint training mission in Iraq within the US-led coalition. Mr Key says the two countries have a well-established relationship and aspects such as training exercises and intelligence sharing will not change. He says in reality Mr Trump and the US will have bigger fish to fry, and he believes it will be pretty much business as usual for New Zealand. The Labour Party says the impact of a Trump presidency will become clearer once his key advisers have been appointed, including the new Secretary of Defence. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The terminally ill prisoner Vicky Latelli is leaving jail so she can be cared for at home by her family. Latelli's family have been fighting for her to be given compassionate release from the 3-year, 2-month sentence she's serving for fraud. The parole board initially turned down their request, but in a decision released today says she's clearly very seriously ill and unlikely to recover. It says she has no other history of offending. Her uncle, Ula Latelli, has been with her at the prison in Wiri as she packs up and told Checkpoint her family is relieved and grateful for the change of heart.
She's in a pile of mess at the moment of joy and happiness, and so we're just packing her up, and then Mum Tui is arriving shortly, and then we're going to take her home.
Ula Latelli. The government has given the green light to a speed limit of 110 kilometres an hour on some of the country's busiest highways. Under proposed guidelines, a road would need to have a medium barrier and at least 2 lanes in each direction to be eligible. Parts of the Auckland motorway network, the Waikato Expressway and the new Tauranga Eastern Link currently meet the criteria for a higher speed limit. Labour's transport spokesperson Stuart Nash says a danger could be that people will go even faster than 110.
What happens in people's minds is they go, well, 110 is the limit, I can drive at 115 and get away with it. And so they go off the Auckland motorway and they go onto a road where the speed limit's 100. They're still travelling at 110 because they've been doing that for the last hour. And I just think we're playing with fire and we're playing with the lives of Kiwis.
Labour's Stuart Nash. Other sections that could be considered in the future for a higher speed limit are the Kapiti Expressway, Transmission Gully and the northern section of Christchurch motorway. A new safety report shows some patients have gone blind over eye treatment delays at public hospitals. The Health Quality and Safety Commission today released its latest report on the errors in public hospitals that harmed or could have harmed patients over the past year. It says district health boards reported 44 events or incidents involving problems with eye treatment. The problems included delays in people getting follow-up appointments and in some cases eye conditions deteriorated. The Commission Chair, Ellen Mary, says it's not good enough.
I can't give you an exact number, but we do know that there have been some patients who have even lost vision and become blind, and that's a very serious matter.
Professor Ellen Mary. The police are searching for a woman missing from a walking track in South Otago. The 70-year-old woman was reported missing from the settlement of Tairi Mouth just after 3 o'clock this afternoon. She's believed to be on the Millennium track, which follows the Tairi River. The police described the woman as of Malaysian and Indian descent and wearing a blue jacket and blue trousers. It's 6:05. In sport, the All Blacks selectors have made 13 changes from the starting side that lost to Ireland for Sunday morning's game against Italy in Rome. The only two players to survive are lock Patrick Tuipulotu and wing Waisaki Naholo. Lock Scott Barrett and fullback Damien McKenzie get their first starts, while hooker Liam Coltman and wing Rico Ioane are set to make their debuts from the bench. Sam Cane will captain the side for just the second time, with Kieran Reid rested. The underperforming opener Martin Guptill has been dropped from the New Zealand cricket side for the two-test series against Pakistan. He's been replaced by Auckland teammate Jeet Raval. He and Colin de Grandhomme are the two uncapped players in the squad, which also features one-test spinner Todd Astle. Selector Gavin Larson says there were plenty of discussion over Guptill's recent form.
When you think about the opening spot, there's been a lot of conjecture about, Martin's form, and we just felt that the time was right to offer Jeet Raval an opportunity. Toddy Astle coming in, Ish has been probably a little erratic in the test that he did play over in India, and the feeling is that he's better served to be back with ND just at the moment.
Gavin Larson. Fit again pace bowler Tim Southey replaces Doug Bracewell, with Luke Ronke and Jeetan Patel also dropped. The Kiwis prop Jared Wairera-Hargreaves will stay with the Sydney Roosters until at least the end of 2020 after signing a 3-year National Rugby League contract extension. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the adventures of Chloe Phillips-Harris in Kazakhstan. From hunting with eagles to spending time in jail after being mistaken for an Australian, Philippa Tolly takes her investigation into prostitution in Aotearoa to the streets. This week's cultural ambassador, Miles Buckingham, has a selection of slightly dope-infused music from Jamaica, which will go nicely with a special report into the science of drugs on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato and Taupo, also Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Sunny spells today, mostly cloudy tomorrow and scattered showers developing from afternoon. Possible thunderstorms in Northland tomorrow night. Waitomo, Taranaki, Taumaranui and Taihape, mostly cloudy with drizzle at times, turning to rain later tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, isolated showers clearing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Wairarapa, rain at times, clearing from Whanganui, Manawatu and Wairarapa tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Nelson, Bulla and Westland, rain north of Hokitika, spreading south tomorrow with heavy falls developing. For Canterbury, cloudy areas, patchy rain developing tomorrow morning, rain becoming widespread and heavier from afternoon. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine today, a few showers tomorrow, and the Chatham Islands mainly fine today, low cloud and rain developing tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for, and I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country.
Hillary Clinton publicly conceding the presidential election to Donald Trump with tears in her eyes, surrounded by supporters. But others are not talking unity, with thousands of demonstrators taking to the streets in cities across the US to protest Donald Trump's surprise presidential election victory. The demonstrators have blasted Mr. Trump's campaign rhetoric about immigrants, Muslims and other groups. Thousands thronged Midtown Manhattan and marched to Trump Tower. Well, at a park further downtown, hundreds of people shouted, not my president. And in Chicago, thousands gathered outside the Trump International Hotel and Tower downtown, chanting phrases like "No Trump," "No KKK," "No Racist USA." Protests were also held in Seattle, Philadelphia, Boston, Portland, and elsewhere. CNN's Jason Carroll looks back now on an extraordinary night in US politics and what may happen next.
Tonight, Donald Trump is embracing a new reality as the next president of the United States.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. And we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country.
The president-elect pulling off a stunning victory, capturing the key battleground states of Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio, and blasting through Hillary Clinton's blue wall in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which put him over the top.
As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. It's a movement comprised of Americans from all races, religions, backgrounds, and beliefs who want and expect our government to serve the people, and serve the people it will.
Trump, the first non-politician to assume the presidency since Dwight Eisenhower, now shifts his focus to the transition to the White House and building a Trump administration. Current RNC chairman Reince Priebus, one potential option for Trump's chief of staff.
I haven't thought about it. And right now I'm chairman of the party. I'm excited about that job.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie also mentioned as a possibility for the chief of staff role, with potential cabinet selections including former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Senator Bob Corker, Senator Jeff Sessions, and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Starting today, Trump will be offered the daily classified briefings, getting the same high-level intelligence as President Obama, who will welcome Trump to the White House tomorrow.
We all want what's best for this country. That's what I heard in Mr. Trump's remarks last night. That's what I heard when I spoke to him directly, and I was heartened by that. That's what the country needs.
Once Trump takes office in January, he'll have Republican majorities in both houses of Congress to help push through his agenda.
I think what Donald Trump just pulled off is an enormous political feat. It's an enormous feat in that he heard those voices that were out there that other people weren't hearing, and he just earned a mandate, and we now just have that unified Republican government.
Despite his overwhelming electoral college win, Trump still faces the challenge of bringing together a nation bitterly divided by a hard-fought campaign.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Donald Trump with Mike Pence nodding vigorously beside him. As the dust settles or doesn't on the election, it seems the TPP has gone the same way as the Clinton campaign, lost beneath blue-collar voters in the Rust Belt. Gary Hofbauer of the Peterson Institute of International Economics, formerly of the International Law Institute at Georgetown University, Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Trade and Investment Policy at the US Treasury, and Director of the International Tax Staff at the US Treasury, thinks the TPP has been cast as a greater villain than it is by the Trump campaign, but as it currently stands, and certainly with US membership, he also thinks it's gone.
For the US, it's gone. It is that simple. But remember, as you well know, the TPP was born without the US, and there's no reason that it can't go forward to conclusion amongst willing partners, amongst the other 11 countries or such as agree with the very good agreement that's been reached without the U.S. I think that's, certainly possible, but the U.S. participation in the TPP is now in the dustbin of history.
Why was Donald Trump so strongly against it? Was it simply that he understood that would get him to blue-collar voters in the Rust Belt, for example? Did he play that card for them, or was there something more sincere in his opposition?
Well, on the sincerity question, which is a good one, Trump has been opposed to trade agreements for at least 25 years, maybe 30 years. Various speeches at various points, he has opposed them. So on that, he's consistent, and possibly he's quite sincere. In addition, in this election, the TPP, as well as NAFTA, were highly identified with the ills that face the working class people that you mentioned, the blue-collar working class people.
So he says, as it stands, with US membership, the TPP will not be happening. Anti-Trump Americans are already talking up New Zealand as somewhere to escape to on the other side of the world. Immigration New Zealand says its website had 56,000 visits in the past day. That's almost 2,500% more than normal. While Google search results for things like move to New Zealand and New Zealand jobs have skyrocketed. Max Toll reports.
Swarms of anti-Trump protesters are taking to the streets in several US cities chanting, "Not my president." What seemed like a joke during the race, that hundreds of Americans would escape to New Zealand should Donald Trump win, now doesn't seem so funny. At least not for Californian Kanan Sasha.
That's kind of a thing Americans always joke about before every election. They're like, if my candidate doesn't win, I'm moving to Canada. And then I think it got kind of real this time.
She says she doesn't know anyone who voted for Trump and now feels disillusioned with her country.
Regardless of anyone's individual reasons for voting for Trump for a candidate, they were endorsing someone who has a known history of sexually assaulting women and being Islamophobic and being xenophobic and being misogynistic. And it just blows my mind that he represents so many people.
In Chicago, a disenfranchised activist, Sarah Croth, says she began considering moving to New Zealand as soon as it became apparent Trump would win.
I feel almost like it doesn't matter because he'll still be president even if I leave. Some of my coworkers actually are already looking at contacts they have there. My friends in New Zealand have said that they would take me in. Oh my gosh, I just hope Obama barricades the doors and doesn't come out.
She's not the only one eyeing up New Zealand. Immigration New Zealand says about 3,000 Americans usually register their interest in moving here per month. Yesterday, alone, it received more than 7,000 registrations. TradeMe says it's had 90,000 searches from US-based people in the last 9 days, and yesterday the average number doubled. Realestate.co.nz's traffic from the US was up 141% yesterday compared to a year ago. Jess Ducey is an American living in New Zealand. She says those who would be able to leave the US and come to a place like New Zealand wouldn't be the type of people who need to.
I've talked to friends. A lot of us have traveled. A lot of us have lived abroad at different points. And so it's not an unreasonable possibility, and some that are looking at it more seriously. But I think there's a realization amongst a lot of them that if you can get out, if you can move to New Zealand, if you can get a New Zealand work visa, you're better off than most. So the people who most desperately would need asylum, the people whose lives are in active danger are the ones that are already struggling to get to other countries.
The president of the Auckland Property Investors Association, Andrew Bruce, is playing down the possibility of a mass influx of Americans and the impact that would have on the property market.
It's a big move to all of a sudden up sticks and move from your country of origin and actually move to the other side of the world.
It's not just New Zealand Americans are eyeing up. Canada's immigration website crashed during the peak of election night too. For Checkpoint, call Max Toll 10A.
Just before we move on for the evening from our coverage of the US elections, Reuters have filed a package on who is America's next First Lady. Her name, of course, is Melania Trump, but who is she really? Here's Mana Ravi.
Donald Trump's election victory shocked many.
But for those who knew wife Melania as a girl, her ascension to the White House as the next First Lady doesn't really surprise. The 46-year-old, once called Melania Knaus, was raised in the tiny Slovenian town of Sevnica. Old friends there say they rooted for her throughout the campaign, including childhood friend Mirjana Jelančić, who remembers Melania as ambitious even as a young, aspiring model.
As a child, Melania was very creative and innovative already, and in that sense, Sevnica was just too small for her. And I believe that is why she found her path to success abroad.
But Melania's appearance on the campaign trail didn't always go smoothly, most notably her Republican convention speech, when she was accused of plagiarizing language from one Michelle Obama had famously given.
Because we want our children in this nation to know that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
None of that swayed her supporters in Sevnica.
I believe she will make an excellent First Lady and that she will take her Slovenian values and bring them to America and the world at large.
Melania's family still owns this small home, but the new house she'll be moving to shows just how far she's come.
Well, the newly elected President Donald Trump has been added to the Reserve Bank's list of risks to watch out for. The central bank cut the official cash rate this morning to a record low of 1.75%, which it expects to leave it at for some time. The bank's governor, Graham Wheeler, says Mr Trump's surprise victory did not affect today's decision. But he told our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara, that Donald Trump's economic protectionism could hurt what is already a weak global environment.
The market will focus, I think, a lot on who are the people that he gets around him in terms of advisors and potentially cabinet ministers, who the Treasury Secretary might be, and is there going to be greater clarity on these trade issues? So when he says things like, I want to renegotiate the NAFTA, or I want to oppose TPP, or call China a currency manipulator and put a 45% tariff, then that's when I think people will be enormously interested to see what he will do there. And I think that has potentially very significant consequences for New Zealand.
Would you put then a Trump presidency at the top of your list of risks that are out there in the global environment?
You could see the US economy, its growth rate accelerate if it does have a very large fiscal stimulus. The interesting thing will be what does it do in terms of tax policy and infrastructure spending on the fiscal side, but particularly what is he going to do on trade policy? That's absolutely paramount. So
you are reflecting then a lot of the uncertainty that's really out there about him and what he's going to do.
Clearly there's a great deal of uncertainty. But there are other risks out there as well. I mean, we've seen Theresa May indicate that she wants to trigger Article 50 by March next year. Very unclear just what that process will be and what the UK negotiating strategy will be and what the European partners will be, how they will be responding to that. We've just seen the President of China get more centralised power in the last plenum. You've seen enormous build-up, and it really is an enormous build-up. I don't think the world's ever seen a build-up of corporate debt relative to GDP of the magnitude in dollar terms, in dollar amounts, that China has undertaken over the last 7 years. So there's risks around that. Brazil is still in recession, Russia, issues around the Middle East. Most of the risks that I think we face in our economy relate to the international economy.
It's Graham Wheeler speaking to our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara. Some popular swimming spots in Canterbury are now cleaner than they were a year ago, but most people will need to drive quite a distance to find them. New figures show that of 52 locations monitored by the Canterbury Regional Council last summer, 12 showed an improvement on the summer before. Here's our Christchurch local government reporter, Conan Young.
Only one spot, South Canterbury's Opihi River, was worse over the period, but it's still considered swimmable. Among the big improvers is North Canterbury's Huranui River, where water quality has gone from poor to fair. The council water scientist, Tim Davey, says the results represent a significant improvement.
It's primarily through stock exclusion, so there are rules in place now. They have to be excluded, particularly in the lowland rivers. But then people will go a lot further and fence and then actually plant up the edges of rivers, so we're getting an improvement across from that.
However, Tim Davey admits there is still a lot of work to do to make waterways in and around Christchurch swimmable again. He says everybody has a role to play in helping to ensure farmers and others comply with the rules.
Fundamentally, we rely on people doing the right thing. And I would say 90 to 95% of the time they do the right thing. But we do have compliance monitoring that goes on, and that starts checking up on these things. If people see examples of when they see practices that they think shouldn't be happening, then there is a pollution hotline they can ring in on.
One swimming spot that hasn't changed is the lower reaches of the Selwyn River, where Mike Glover lives and where the water quality has the lowest possible rating.
It's been a funny green colour over the winter. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be like this summer, but we certainly wouldn't be encouraging our daughter to go and swim in there. It's got a toxic algae sign up there as well. That's on top of the E. coli. So, it's pretty grim. Makes me feel really angry, really.
Mike Glover, who this year organised a Walk for Water hikoi to raise awareness of water quality problems, notes that most of the swimmable rivers are a long way from where most people live.
When they come out and say that things are improving, I like them to come down to the Selwyn huts and tell people things are improving, because it's just been getting worse down there rather than better. It's pretty outrageous, really.
The Canterbury Medical Officer of Health, Dr Alistair Humphrey, says the lowland streams, which just happen to be closest to where most people live, will take the longest to improve to a state where they're safe to swim in. But he says the latest results are pleasing.
It shows that the Canterbury water management strategy is heading in the right direction. It shows that farmers are definitely making an effort and they're doing the right thing. We're not out of the woods yet, of course. We've got to keep going, but it is good news.
While popular swimming spots are improving, the picture is less rosy when you look at the rivers and lakes overall in Canterbury. Last year, the council revealed there had been a decrease in the number of waterways that were safe to swim in, from 74% in 2010 to just 67% by last year. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young Tene.
It's coming up to 26.5 minutes past 6. We started the program tonight with the breaking news that Vicky Latelli was leaving the correctional facility where she had been held. Vicky, of course, is terminally ill, and her family had gone to get her after the parole board and corrections, and everyone agreed she could be allowed to go home with her family. We spoke to her uncle, Ula, who was collecting her then. Ula, are you there now?
I am, John. Thank you.
Ula, are you in the car now?
I am. We've just picked up Vicky, and we're going to take her home. And I'm just going to pass you on to her, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ula. Thank you.
Hi, John.
Hey, Vicky. You're out.
Yes, I'm out. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Oh, you don't look that. You don't. Let's talk about who are you with? Who are you with? You got your mum with you? Is Tui there?
No, they're all behind her at the moment. It's just me and Uncle Ula and my namesake in the back.
You're in a bit of a convoy, a bit of a family convoy's come to collect you.
My whole family behind me. We're getting back to my house now.
It must be so good to be going home.
I still can't believe it, John. I just had my first whack of chemo infusion today, and they come and woke me up and told me the good news, and my emotions have just taken over, and I just don't know how to feel at the moment. I'm just so humbled.
All of this has been so big so fast, hasn't it? And that's a big whack, that first infusion of chemo, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And so where did you have that? Did you come into town to hospital today and then go back to the prison after that? How did that work, Vicky?
Yeah, I left Woody Prison around 6 a.m. this morning, and I had first infusion around 8 a.m. and then left there at 2:30 to come back to prison. And they came in around 4:30, I think, in the afternoon to let me know the news, and I just started crying.
Yeah, I bet you did. Gosh, your family have been fantastic. Your uncle, who you are in the car with, Ula, your mum, Tui, your partner, Leah, they have campaigned for you with a singular love.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm so blessed, John. I have such great support, and if it, the whole reason for us getting behind and doing it was not just for me, but it's for everyone that is in there, that has gone before me, and those that will come after me. It's for them that don't have the support, and so I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm so humbled, and I'm glad that this is not going to just benefit me and my family, but it's going to benefit the families of those that are still yet to come in my shoes. That no one should have to go through that.
Vicky, this is such a tough conversation to have because you are terminally ill. You have been diagnosed with incurable cancer. Is prison any place to be when you are that unwell and when time is really limited?
Definitely not, no. No, it's no place, and without the support of my family and without my God, there's no way I would have got through what I went through, and I'm just so humbled. I still can't believe it, John.
Well, Vicky, thank you for talking to us, and please thank your Uncle Ula for passing us over to you, and you go home and rest and take care of yourself. That's Vicky Latelli, who was in the car leaving Wiri prison, having been discharged for compassionate reasons after corrections and the parole board and everyone made the decision it was time for her to go home. Ending Checkpoint for tonight. About 30 seconds later, apologies to Katrina. We will be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Thousands of demonstrators have spilled into city streets across the United States to protest against Donald Trump's shock victory in the presidential election. The parole board has released the terminally ill prisoner Vicky Latelli early from jail so she can be cared for at home. The government is supporting a speed limit of 110 kilometres an hour on some highways, and a safety report